What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now I want to do this HBO free TV pay-per-view budget cut PBC freestyle video. Now, one of the most important things about this business is the ability to forecast, to think of things before they actually happen. And I try to do that on my channel. And I made a video probably half a year ago about the HBO budget cuts. A lot of people said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. HBO's doing fine, they'll do fine. But you see more and more signs of what I was talking about in that earlier video. So this is kind of like an updated video. Now, I did a video the other day, and the rumor is, Ego Rumor Mill, that Manny Pacquiao versus Jesse Vargas, really not a fight that people were requesting. In fact, there's other people in line that, like a Crawford, a Keith Thurman, Broner, Garcia, that I believe the fans would be anticipating a lot more than a Jesse Vargas championship fight, for reasons that are obvious. And HBO's not picking up that fight. That's the rumor. They're not picking up the fight. Maybe it'll land on like an ESPN pay-per-view. I'm not sure. It won't come out until September what the actual finalized deals are with that, but it's not going to be on HBO. It's looking like. HBO's been doing a lot of budget cuts. Their boxing programming has suffered. If you notice, there's a lot of big high-profile fights that have not gotten any kind of special treatment. For example, Pacquiao fought Bradley a third time, another fight that people weren't really requesting of Pacquiao. In my opinion, Pacquiao beat Bradley twice. Bradley's a hell of a fighter, but there was really no reason for that to happen a third time. They made it anyway. As you guys seen, the pay-per-view numbers weren't what they were supposed to be. In fact, Bob Arum said the numbers are terrible or not good. Those are the two phrases that he used when talking about the numbers. And people are making this whole pay-per-view deal sound like it's rocket science. I don't really think it's like, I think maybe some of these companies need to use like some of their interns, get some fresh blood in there, get some young Richard Schaefer type dudes with the right business mind, because to me it's not hard. If you want to make it a pay-per-view, I do think you can make pay-per-views still. I think there's still a market for it. I think people will pay for it. However, with the Amazon Fire Stick, streaming, all these streaming websites and all this shit, I think you have to make it worth people's while. At least have a good main event. That's a great start. If your main event is decent, load the undercard with some good fights. Like Canelo Smith, I made a video about this. Canelo Smith, no one's really requesting that fight. Nobody was just like, yeah, man, you know who I want to see Canelo fight? I want to see him fight Liam Smith. However, if he fought Demetrius Andrade, good stylistic match. One of the Charlo brothers, a lot of rematch. Imagine a lot of rematch in Texas, right? Laura trains in Texas, so maybe he has a following there, or at least friends and family there. Canelo's a big star in Texas, where there's a high Hispanic demographic and population. Why not make Canelo Laura too, or at least attempt to, instead of Liam Smith? Now, another fight that was supposed to be on that undercard was Kamagai versus Soto Caras 2, but they moved that, and that's on the Chocolatito undercard at the Forum. Luis King Kong Ortiz was supposed to be on that undercard, but now he's trying to get out of his Golden Boy contract, and he's not fighting Ustinov on the undercard of Canelo Smith. And then the third fight was a fight between Gabe Rosado versus Billy Joe Saunders, and it doesn't look like that fight's going to happen. There's a video I seen, just a snippet on Ellie Sekback's Instagram, and he's interviewing Gabe Rosado, and he's basically saying he's signed, but Billy Joe Saunders hasn't signed yet. So it doesn't look like the fight's going to happen. So that's three fights that were talks, or in talks to be on the Canelo Smith, that are on HBO pay-per-view. That's an HBO pay-per-view, Canelo versus Liam Smith, and none of those three fights are landing. So to me, what's going to be the undercard? You know what I mean? Joseph Diaz Jr. and Jason Quigley, that's not strong enough to me. Like, for example, like I said, this is not rocket science. David Lemieux versus Curtis Stevens, put that on the undercard instead of having it in Canada in October. That would help sell this card. And I think those are the decisions. Like, okay, Golden Boy's probably thinking, hey, that's a standalone fight that could do numbers on its own. I get that, but you're investing this money in Canelo expecting some type of numbers. Sometimes you got to stretch it. Sometimes you have to make those fights. Instead of that being a standalone fight, load up the Canelo versus Smith card, because right now you don't have much as a selling point. So I can't see it doing great numbers. You look at Canelo's past non-Miguel Cotto and non-Floyd Mayweather, and the reason I'm not including those people is because they were already proven stars before Canelo, probably before Canelo was even born, but definitely before Canelo's rise. Cotto had already been on pay-per-view, same thing with Mayweather. But you looked at the other guys that Canelo fought that had not been on pay-per-view main events before Canelo, like Alfredo Angulo, the fight with Edeslani Lara, and those fights did probably like 300,000 to 400,000. You know what I mean? And 400,000 pushing it. I think it was closer to like 350, 375 maybe for those pay-per-view buys. So I mean, realistically, what are you expecting to get out of the Canelo Smith fight with no undercard? So for a while, the HBO boxing department has definitely suffered. Another thing that I noticed is with HBO's boxing department, the budget cuts have hurt some good potential fights from happening, and it seems to be an ongoing thing. For example, Vasyl Lomachenko was in talks versus Nicholas Walters at the first or second quarter of this year. That's a hell of a fight. That's a great fight. The only problem is neither one of them are huge stars like Canelo, Mayweather, Pacquiao type of star. But as a fight fan, that's a good ass fight. Lomachenko would be moving up, which he did do later, but moving up to 130 to fight Nicholas Walters, the Axeman, a power puncher who can box and is undefeated, good body puncher, things like that. Lomachenko, he's crafty, he has a lot of movement, athleticism, good angles. You know what I'm saying? That's a hell of a fight. But the problem was HBO, between Top Rank and HBO, I don't know exactly who authorizes the money, but it sounded like HBO was only willing to put up a little bit over $1 million to make that fight. And you look at the PBC side of things, guys like Robert Guerrero got $1 million when he was fighting, I think, Kamagai. He got over $1 million when he fought Danny Garcia. They both got over $1 million. So the budget cuts are really hurting, because I'm not saying that's $2 million. Okay, I understand everyone might not have the budget for that, but if you offered Nicholas Walters 800,000 and Lomachenko 800,000, that's less than 2 million. You know what I mean? That's $1.5 million, a little bit over that, right? 1.6. That's a reasonable purse for both fighters, because as far as I'm concerned, this is the thing. HBO, they're promoting kind of who they want to promote, and they're telling the fans like Lomachenko is the truth. He's a great fighter, but he's not this A side like they're trying to make him out to be. He's not this superior, like, put it this way. You look at Lomachenko when he fought his last fight with Rocky Martinez, and then you look at Nicholas Walters when he was fighting Donaire, and look at those types of numbers, and a lot of them are comparable. It's not like Lomachenko's just doing these astronomical numbers and Nicholas Walters is doing very few numbers when he's fought on HBO Boxing After Dark or whatever he's fought. You know what I'm saying? So I get it. You want to promote Lomachenko, but you're making it like he's superior and such an A side. And I mean, that's the problem with boxing. Not everyone's an A side. So anyway, back to the Walters Lomachenko situation. The fight fell apart. They were trying to do some kind of side bet where Walters was getting lowballed, and only if he were to win he would get an extra 300,000, which is stupid, because if anyone who teaches business, anybody in the art of business, if you know anything about business, you always want the sure money. You want the sure shot. Nobody's trying to do, like, if you drive Lyft or have a YouTube channel and Lyft is saying, hey, you know what, you do these 150 rides, and once they're completed, then we might pay you. You know what I'm saying? No one's trying to do no side deals or whatever, or we might give you this amount. We'll give you this amount, but if we like your work, then we'll give you even more. Like, no one's trying to do that. You know what I mean? Oh, ego, if you make 100 videos in this period of time, I'll give you this lowballed amount, and depending on this or that, we'll give you more money. Like, no, I need a straight answer how much I'm getting, point blank, period. And that's what it is with Walters and Lomachenko, especially in the world of boxing. Because you look at, in the world of boxing, screwy shit happens. Walters clearly beat Jason Sosa, and they said it was a draw. So what would happen if that happened with Lomachenko? They scored it a draw, for example. Does he get the 300,000? Because technically a draw is a half win, a half loss. Is he going to get 150,000? It's just too up in the air, and nobody's trying to do no stupid shit like that. But the reason why I say it's an ongoing issue is because it's still happening. They were trying to make a rematch between Lomachenko and Orlando Salido, another good fight. That's the guy that dealt Lomachenko a loss. Guess what? They're arguing over money. They're trying to pay Lomachenko more money, and Salido is the guy that beat Lomachenko. Salido is the guy with a better resume, more fights. He has more losses, but he also has more fights, and he holds a win over Lomachenko. You gotta look at the game and respect. I feel Salido on this because Salido's been in there with Rocky Martinez twice, Juan Manuel Marquez, a Hall of Famer when he retires, right? He's been in there with Robert Guerrero. He's been in there with Yuriorkis Gamboa. He fought the guy Kokit Jim in I don't know where they were, maybe Japan. He fought him. He fought Juanma Lopez. I mean, clearly Mikey Garcia. I mean, do you guys watch boxing? He clearly has a resume. And then on top of that, he just had a Fight of the Year candidate versus Francisco Vargas, and a lot of people thought he won that fight. I thought he beat Rocky Martinez in their second fight. So technically he should have been a champion going into the Francisco Vargas fight. And then after that fight, some people had Salido winning, and that would have been two opportunities. Basically there are people out there in Salido's last two fights that believe he should be holding one or two belts right now. You know what I mean? Either Francisco Vargas's belt or the belt that Lomachenko now has, because he stepped up and knocked out Rocky Martinez, right? So why can't you pay the man Orlando Salido? Again, better resume. He beat Lomachenko, and it's because what HBO is trying to do. They're looking at Lomachenko, clean cut. He has a style that's where he's not sweet science enough where they're going to call him boring, even though he fights very similar to fighters that they stylistically have said are boring. You know what I'm saying? Athletic, a lot of movement, counter punching, stuff like that, angles, things like that. But they've invested so much money into him basically that they want him to be the A side. So that's another fight that looks like it's not going to happen, and it looks like Salido may end up facing the guy that Francisco Vargas beat, which is the Takashi Miura, or whatever his name is, the one that had the Fight of the Year on the Cotto Canelo undercard. So to me, these are all telltale signs that a lot of this is stemming from HBO's budget cuts, because Walters was a great fight for Lomachenko, fell apart. We don't know if we'll ever see that or when it'll happen, because they couldn't put together enough money to satisfy both parties, which is a reasonable amount. Reasonable, right? It's not like Walters beat Donaire, a guy and no one's ever knocked Donaire out. So you can't just make it like he's just a bum. You know what I mean? He knocked out Vic Darchinyan, whereas when Donaire rematched him, Donaire knocked Darchinyan out too, but when Donaire rematched him, he was struggling. He was losing the fight before he was able to put it together and stop Darchinyan the second time. That didn't happen with Walters. He went in there and bombed him out, right? Walters avenged the amateur loss to Miguel Mariaga and stuff like that. So to me, the bottom line is what I'm saying is, why are all these fights falling apart? It's because of money. It's because HBO is not trying to fork over the ducats to make these fights, and they're good fights. Lomachenko with Walters, I would love to see that fight, right? Lomachenko versus Orlando Salido too, I would love to see those fights. But again, they don't want to pay a guy with a better resume that beat Lomachenko enough money, because he's a guy with losses. Orlando Salido is like a really rugged style, and that's not the guy that they're trying to market. They're trying to market the Eastern European that studied Roy Jones Jr. and mimics some of Roy Jones' things, like the angles and the athleticism, things of that sort, in Lomachenko. And now it looks like another fight that's not going to happen. So the budget cuts are really hurting, especially when you have PBC over there who are putting on free fights, and the fans. See, this is the thing. Thurman Porter, let's say it sucked, which it clearly didn't. Let's say it sucked. You lose nothing other than time, but that's with any fight. If Canelo Liam Smith is a shitty fight, and if something bullshit happens, a cut, stoppage, and it goes to scorecards and Canelo wins or something after a couple rounds, then you're out of $70, $80, especially if they don't put exciting fights on the undercard. So if they put Curtis Stevens, David Lemieux on the undercard, then no matter what happens with the main event, at least you got to see that fight, which I can't imagine Lemieux versus Stevens won't end in a knockout or won't be action-packed, right? But if we're putting Canelo Smith on a pay-per-view, and at the moment, the fight's, next month? And I haven't heard any major fights on the undercard, then that means the biggest selling point for that fight card is Canelo Smith. Do you get my point? Versus Porter Thurman. Porter Thurman, the initial undercard was supposed to be Abner Mares versus Jesus Cuellar. They were going to put those good of fights on the same card. The only reason that didn't happen is because Abner Mares, he couldn't pass a physical or whatever in the strict state of New York with the athletic commission. So hopefully that fight gets pushed back. But instead we got a Jared Hurd fight, which versus Molina, and that was a solid fight, one-sided, but it was solid, good action, good. The uppercut was nasty on Hurd's behalf, Jared Swift Hurd. So that's my point. These pay-per-views, they're not making it worth the fans' while. Canelo, Khan, all the fights, like that would have easily, if I did a prediction for each one of those, my prediction streak would easily be the same, because I predicted all of those outcomes. There was no shock, there was no change, there was no rabbit out of the hat performance where someone rose to the occasion, like Joe Smith Jr. did versus Fonfara, like Felix Diaz did against the prospect who just stopped, I think, Aaron Martinez, Sammy Vasquez. Felix Diaz looked good in that fight. A lot of people thought, oh, he lost to Peterson. Who's this guy? He looks really short. You know what I mean? And then he ended up dogging Sammy Vasquez, who showed heart. I give credit to Vasquez. He showed heart, but that was, I would consider that an upset, because Vasquez, even though Diaz was a gold medalist, I believe, in the Olympics, just people weren't checking for Felix Diaz, and he already had a career loss to Lamont Peterson, whether you thought he won that fight or not. So, I mean, it's a big difference when you're paying for the shit versus when you're watching on free. You don't really lose anything. Just picture a haircut. If you get a haircut that's just okay and you pay $30 for it versus your friend did it in his garage and it's the same haircut, but it was free, which one are you going to be more mad at? The haircut you paid $30 for and you just think it's okay and it's not the best, right? And with PBC fights, we know that's not the case. A lot of those haircuts, so to speak, for this analogy, are not just okay. Like Leo Santa Cruz versus Carl Frampton was not just okay. That was a dope-ass fight. You know what I mean? Adonis Stevenson versus Thomas Williams Jr. was not just okay. I enjoyed Berto versus Victor Ortiz. I went to that fight live. On the same undercard, you had Edwin Rodriguez versus Thomas Williams Jr., which was an absolute war that was short. It wasn't a bunch of breaking down the styles and you're in the 10th round and whose game plan is working. They were swinging to take each other's head off. They hurt each other, and Thomas Top Dog Williams was victorious, and he knocked out Edwin Rodriguez, who had never been stopped before. So, I mean, that's what you're kind of getting on free TV with the PBC brand. You know what I mean? Garcia Guerrero, people forget that was this year. That was in January. And for whatever reason, on the HBO side, it's just slowly but surely just kind of dwindling down, and they got to do something. Because even Showtime we were also supposed to get like fights like Wilder and Povetkin, but even with that not happening because Wilder's hurt now, you're still getting other fights. Like they're talking about the Charlo brother fighting J. Rock Williams. I mean, that's a hell of a fight. That actually means something. So it's getting harder and harder as time goes on to justify these HBO pay-per-views. Other thing I want to talk about would be Andre Ward versus Kovalev, which to me, the HBO's putting that's the most meaningful fight of this year. So I have no problem. I would never tell anyone not to pay for that fight because that's a meaningful fight. It's two of the division's best. The only other person you could argue would maybe be Adonis Stevenson, but I mean the quality of opposition between Ward and Kovalev, stylistic matchup. That's a fight everybody should be checking for, and it looks like that's probably why they didn't pick up the Pacquiao fight, because it'd be very hard to have all these pay-per-views like Crawford Postal, Canelo Khan, Canelo Smith, and then on top of that, have 2 pay-per-views in the month of November, Pacquiao-Vargas, Kovalev Ward. So to me, I think HBO made the smart decision with that by not even picking up the Pacquiao-Vargas fight, because nobody's really checking for it. Pacquiao didn't do no type of numbers versus Bradley 3, so I think his star power is not necessarily the same as it once was, meaning you can't just put him in there with anybody and expect it to do numbers. If Pacquiao was fighting Broner, I guarantee you HBO probably would have picked that fight up, because they know there's a lot of money there, but they're getting a lot stricter with the fights that they choose to pick up. They're not just going to pick up something that they don't think they'll get a return on their investment. So to me, I would put my ducks in, I would put my dollars behind Kovalev Ward, because at the very least, it's a meaningful fight. You may get a knockout. It's a fight for 175-pound supremacy versus Pacquiao-Vargas. I mean, he's already beaten Vargas type of fighters before. You know what I mean? He's already beaten guys who are first round Hall of Famers above Vargas. So I don't know. That fight doesn't really mean as much. If he were able to beat Terrence Crawford, to me, that would mean a lot, because, I mean, Crawford's young. He's a switch hitter. He can go to southpaw. He has a style that's closer to Mayweather's than it is a Rios or Vargas. Vargas has a style that's closer to like a Rios. His caliber is closer to a Rios Algieri than it is to Mayweather, in my opinion. So I don't know. You guys let me know, but it's just getting harder and harder to justify paying for all these fights, and on top of that, not even loading some of the cards. And then fights like I said with Lomachenko, Salido, they don't want to pay Walters enough. They don't want to pay Salido enough. Like who can get a reasonable payday? What do you have to do? You know what I mean? Walters is a hell of a fighter. He has an action style, clearly has power. It's a fight that the fans would want, but you can only give him $500,000 and a side bet, right? Same thing with Salido. Salido clearly has a better resume. Guys like Mikey Garcia and everybody I named earlier, he's been in the ring with them. Gamboa clearly has a better resume than Lomachenko at this point. He's a warrior. He has the blood and guts style more so than a Walters. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's just, because Walters is a smarter fighter and Salido's more just all action, and if you don't hurt him and get him out of there, then he's going to just keep coming, kind of like a Terminator type of style, like a Baby Margarito type. And so it's not like he's not entertaining. All of his fights are entertaining, where he's at least bringing the action, making it dirty, rugged, or whatever he has to do to try to secure the victory. He beat Lomachenko. He can't get enough. He's a former champion, and arguably he should have got a belt in 1 or 2, if not both of his last fights, and they're trying to give him less than Rocky Martinez got. And the only thing you can say, oh, but Rocky Martinez was a champion. But like I said, I thought Salido, and it's not just me, a lot of people thought Salido beat Rocky Martinez. So technically, it's almost equivalent to a paper champion, because he shouldn't have had his belt on multiple occasions. When he fought Burgos, he should have lost his belt. I think it was that fight, or he should have lost that fight. And then when he fought Salido on the rematch on the Mayweather undercard, he clearly lost to me. So Salido should have had his belt anyway. So why are you going to lowball him too? So to me, it's not looking good for HBO Boxing. I don't know, maybe they're just looking for the quick guaranteed paychecks, like Triple G versus Brook. I think that'll do well. I think the numbers and stuff, just because it's a weird matchup, I think both of them have a good enough fan base in their own right. The location, it'll be free in the States, pay-per-view in the UK. The UK love is real, and they're very loyal to their fighters. So I think that'll do good numbers. So maybe that's what the business of boxing that HBO wants to be in. If it ain't a big fight or leading up to a big fight, like Ward versus Brand, we'll pick that up, even though that's not a big fight, but we'll pick it up because we know that's his last fight before Kovalev. But if it's Pacquiao-Vargas, that's not leading up to anything, like Pacquiao-Crawford or the winner fights Crawford, then I don't think they're even trying to do it. So that's my opinion. I want to do this little freestyle, just under 25 minutes. So let me know what you guys think of HBO Boxing, their current schedule, what we've gotten to this point, them competing with PBC and free TV. Drop that in the comment section. Make sure you like my video as always. Hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, is Ego signing off.